So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our session today with Roya Caviglia from English language teacher and me, Ute Limacher-Riebold from Ute's International Lounge. Maybe before we start, we just introduce ourselves quickly. I'm Ute Limacher-Riebold, and I'm an independent language consultant and intercultural communication trainer at Ute's International Lounge. My background is in Romance, linguistics, and literature, and I help multilingual families maintain their languages whilst enjoying adding more ones to the plate. And I bridge between research and everyday situations and experiences so that we can define realistic and actionable steps. So, Roya, back to you.
Hi, so I'm Roya Caviglia, and my background is in teaching English. I've been doing that for nearly 20 years, and I've been specializing all that time in teaching business English. But since I had my own children 6 years ago now, I became fascinated about language development with babies. So I have the baby sign language program. Some people might know that. And also now my kids are at the age, my son is just turned 6. And that's why now I'm focusing on reading and how this is going to work with our multilingual family. And also I'm running my language school, and we support professionals, international families. So that's teaching adults, but it's also teaching their children and helping them to navigate in a multilingual world that we have here in the Netherlands. And so I'm really excited about this discussion. I'm really happy that we're here together, Ute, today.
Yes. So please ask, if you're following us live, please ask your questions in the chat. And if you're following the recording, you can always ask the questions. We will go back to them afterwards. So you are in the right place this morning. If you are an international family with children between 4 and 7 years old and use other languages at home than the community language or in addition to the community language. Now, teaching children to read is a big topic. So to narrow it down, we are not going to talk about the different cultural approaches to teaching and reading. Let's say what age to start and whether reading or writing comes first, etc. But we will talk about the practicalities of helping our children learn to read in several languages. And we're going to talk about the following questions. Why should we teach our children to read in all languages? Is it okay for children to learn to read in several languages at the same time? And how can we confidently and successfully teach our children to read in our home languages? So Roya is going to start talking about the first question. Why should we teach our child, to read in a language? Sorry.
There it is. The first question is on the screen. That's great. Why should we teach our children to read in our languages? So, we're talking to international families. So you're probably living in a country with a community language that is not your first language or your native language, as am I and Ute. So we're here in the Netherlands. I'm not sure how international right now our audience is, but why should we teach then our children to read in our own languages? So there's so many reasons, lots of things to talk about, but I have a few main points. Possibly the first one is that having access to books and to the words and the vocabulary in books, this is language input, and this is vital for language acquisition. So if you want your children to speak and understand your own language, which I think most parents want that, it's really important to be giving them a rich exposure to the language, especially if it's not the community language. And reading is just wonderful for that. And I've seen that all through my experience of teaching English. Also, it's the same with adults, the same with children, that students who read in a language that they're trying to learn, they improve faster, they learn faster, and they have a bigger vocabulary, they have more confidence. It's so important. And we have a nice slide. Maybe I can ask you, Ute, now to have a look at this one, which talks about why read 20 minutes at home. And you can see here how just an impact of a few minutes at home can build up to how much language students learn. And this is good for adults, but I think also we have here, this is talking about starting reading with children in kindergarten, so small children, how it will build up and how much of an impact it will have with them when they're older. So really we want to look at the green section. That's the one we're focusing on. 20 minutes a day. It's not that much, actually. That's one book, maybe two, depending on the type of book. So we're talking about not chapter books, but books for small children. And 20 minutes a day adds up to several books, and so much input for language and vocabulary. And also for their linguistic and academic performance, this has a huge impact. It's well known that children, in homes that have more books do better at school, just having them around. So, you know, pick them up and use them. And so this is a nice slide to have a look at. 1 minute a day. Okay, a student reads 1 minute a day. We have the red one that he's going to see maybe 8,000 words a year. But a student who reads 20 minutes per day in the green one is looking at nearly 2 million words a year. So this is an incredible difference. And 20 minutes a day adds up. And okay, some days it's not going to work, but it's really worth trying to get in just one book, a goal of one book a day, and having a sort of a set time when you're going to do it. So maybe after breakfast before they go to school, or before bedtime, and fit it in as part of your routine. And then that moves to the next bit. If we talk about reading before bedtime or having it as part of your routine, then it's going to be a lovely bonding experience. And that's also really something really important, that all parents want to bond with their children. They want to look forward to having this nice snuggly time with their children, and speaking together in your first language or your strongest language is going to contribute to that. So it has also an impact on your relationship. And finally, reading is a great way to introduce the world to your children. Yeah, the more languages they can read in, it gives them a passport to the world. Then they are going to have more access to their cultural identity if they're coming from another country than the one where they live in. Will have access to grandparents and extended family who might not speak the community language where they live. And all of this can come from and be supported by reading with your children. So I think that's a lot of reasons to read with your children. Yeah. Would you add anything, Ute, or is there any contact from the audience?
There is no comment from the audience yet, but I'm sure that will come at some point. But at the moment, I don't have more to add. But let us go maybe to the next part. So, which is it okay for children to learn to read in several languages at the same time?
Yeah, this was my question. So yeah, I'm really happy to get the answer to this.
And that's why we do this, because we had this discussion and then we said, okay, we want to share it with others. Because there are two aspects, right? First of all, to learn in all the languages, and then at the same time. We want maybe our children to become pluriliterate or literate in all their languages. But when do we start? How do we start it? When should we start with it? And we get a lot of input from professionals, from teachers, who might say, don't start with reading in the other language before the child starts going to school. And the reason for that is that why teachers suggest actually to first start in the school or the community language, if it's the same, is that it is not easy. Okay. Understanding and speaking comes almost naturally. Yeah, I say almost because we have also to consider children who maybe are hearing impaired, and then when you find out, I mean, it can become even complicated in some cases. So we have to consider the whole spectrum of possibilities. But when it comes to reading and writing, they are skills that require formal instruction. So of course, maybe we are teachers ourselves, like Roya and I, but not everyone is a teacher. Not everyone wants to or can put on the teacher's hat. So if a child already reads in another language, let's say that it was schooled already in, I don't know, French, and starts school in English, this means, for example, for the teacher, that the teacher should know what the child knows already. in order to bridge between what the child knows and what the child is learning in the school language. Now think about a class of 20, 30 children that maybe in in international schools very easily could have between 15 and 20 different home languages. Poor teacher. I mean, you don't need to know all the languages, but you have to understand what the child is doing in your class and where the child needs your help in order to get where the child needs to be at the end of the month, at the end of the year, the school year. So if you think that all the children come to school and already know how to read in different languages that are maybe very different or very similar to the school language, it is like having already not a white page where to write on, where it is you can do it neatly. It is already scribbled on or even written on. And you have to understand every single page. It's much easier for a teacher to start with that, and also because the teachers are trained to do their job. They know what they're doing. They know how to get the child where the child needs to be in the school language.
So, sorry, to clarify, it's easier for the teachers to have a blank page to start with, you mean?
Exactly.
That's how they know how to do it. Yeah, okay.
And it's the most economic choice, right? Because it's the easier way to teach all children the same thing than to teach that child from the beginning, because the child didn't read so far and had no knowledge of the scripts and cannot do the sound. And well, we're going to talk about that. And the other child that already reads fluently for that age group.
Yeah.
Doing all that is quite daunting. I mean, teachers are heroes with these regards, but it gives everyone a much more difficult start. So understanding this, I think, is something that I just wanted to point out why we get this advice. I also was a bit puzzled because my first thing would be, if a child wants to learn something, whatever it is it building a house with Lego? Is it biking, swimming, playing the guitar? I would never say no, But when it comes to certain other skills, if my child wants to learn how to ride, how to steer a car, maybe I can help the child, but would I let my child drive in the traffic? No, because my child does not know the rules yet. Has not this, actually the capacity, the knowledge, and the cognitive skills that are necessary to actually participate in traffic. So, but let me just share something. This is one of the books that I read recently, and where I said, okay, this is a great thing to do. If you want to know more about what reading and does in our brain, or how it functions in the brain, I recommend this book. This is a slide taken from a great presentation on the literacy bug. If you want, you can go to that website to have a look. And actually what she also does is point out the complexity of the whole journey of reading. We have, even in English, when you look up on the internet, what kind of stages do we have? There are different definitions. There are those who say it's early emergent readers, early emergent pre-readers, or emerging pre-readers, like here, like you see, or novice readers. That is the age group that we are talking about. So it is quite confusing sometimes if we don't know what this is. As a parent, we are maybe not the expert, or we're not the teacher. So we get easily confused. And then you see the age gap here between 6 months and 6 years old. Emergent pre-reader, what does this mean? Is my child now that, or is my child already a novice reader? And then you start looking for answers, and maybe, hopefully you find them, but it's really a great journey that you are up to. But let me just make an example, because when I started understanding what was going on, when my children were exposed to English at school, and they wanted also to learn how to read in German and in Italian, because we have German and Italian books at home. And then I said, well, this is way more complicated than I thought. And when I did my teacher training, I was before that time that this book was written, or let's say this research was done by Hollis Scaraborough. And I find this reading rope quite helpful to understand how complex it is to learn to read and to become a skilled reader. The reading rope consists in a lower and an upper strand. The word recognition strands are the ones where we have the phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition of familiar words. Familiar words, I would like to underline this. And they work together as the reader becomes more accurate, more fluent, and increasingly automatic with repetition and practice. Then we have also the upper strand, that is the language comprehension. And there we have the background knowledge, vocabulary knowledge, which is built, over a lifetime, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge, to reinforce one another and then weave together with the word recognition, like we say here, and they weave together, they become one to produce the skilled reader. This does not happen over a year or two. It takes quite some time to get there. So I would like now to, when we start with reading with our children, I would like to start with the lower strand, where we talk about phonological awareness and decoding and sight recognition. What does this mean? I mean, these are nice words, but what is it actually? Phonological awareness is actually the oral language. You have the oral language. We know how the speech can be broken down into smaller units and can be manipulated. So what our children need to learn in this phase is that there are words like rainbow, there are syllables, rainbow, and there are onsets and rhymes. Okay, we maybe use these kind of words, but the child maybe not. But we do it in a playful way if we want to approach the child to literacy. So you have the onset and then aimbe and o as the rhyme. And then we have the phonemes. Haha, nice things. That are the units of sound that distinguish one word from another in a particular language. Now, with English, for example, we have 26 letters, but we have 44 unique sounds. And then you have, think about it like a set of Lego bricks, and we have to make sense out of them, or our children have to make sense out of them. And in order to make sense out of them, they need some guidance.
If I can just jump in there, that's interesting because, lots of small children learn the alphabet song, though, A, B, C, D, da, 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 but actually it's not, with English, it's not all that useful. So with my kids now, we've been talking about the letters have names, A, B, C, D, that's their names, but their sounds, which is what you're talking about, the phonemes, are different. So the letter A, that's his name, but he goes, ah. And then B, that's his name, but he goes, buh. To try and have this
exactly. And this leads me a little bit to what I want to emphasize is even if a child can sing all the alphabet, it doesn't mean that they know what these letters stand for. It's like pictures that have a sound, but how do I combine them? And do I need to combine them? And actually, if I combine them in one way, in one language, it's completely different in the other language. So why and how? And this is the complex thing where I think teachers are better off on teaching this, or parents who are really into it or homeschooling, they get also the manuals to get there. So depending on where a parent is, it can help and it can absolutely be done. But we need to be aware of parents that it's not just something that a child can learn when they're a 3-year-old and they get the whole picture and they become skilled reader by 5. It's unrealistic. So what they also need, they require explicit instruction, a modeling. They need to understand the phonemic structure first. So that is necessary for them to grasp also the alphabetic principle, like you just said, Roya. And the code, that underlies the system of the language, of the written language. So learning to read requires a systematic and explicit instruction of the letter-sound correspondence of the target language that we call phonics, but well, let us look at an example. So we have cat, the word cat. Then we may want to pronounce the individual phonemes. That's k, t, at. And then we blend them together, and preferably it is a word that the child already knows. So it's a known vocabulary, and what comes out is cat. And this will then be stored in the phonological long-term memory, and the child will be able to recognize the word and repeat it and read it. Yeah. So there are some words that are side recognition words, or side word recognition. That's any word that we recognize instantly, automatically, effortlessly, because we have seen it many times or enough time to recognize it without sounding it out, but we just see it and we can repeat it.
You recognize the block. Yeah.
Yes, and sight recognition of words, that requires quite some phonemic awareness and phonic knowledge. And what I would like to stress even more is that it needs an understanding of the meaning of the word, or the connection between the word and the world. Okay, because what we can see now, the last days I was on the internet looking for how to help also very young children to read, and there are many things that can be done even for 3-year-olds, that they can decode the letters or the sounds in some way, but do they understand what they are reading? Yeah. I'm not so sure. So this connection between the word recognition and the language comprehension is a big one. So I might be able to help my 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old child to read perfectly and to do what is asked, but do they really understand what they are reading? And do they understand that one sentence is a question and what the function of a question is or an exclamation is? This is something that needs a formal instruction or some kind of guidance. Another thing that I would like to point out, I hope I'm not too long now. I could talk about this for hours, I'm sorry.
For hours, yeah. I think we're still running on time, so it's okay. Yeah.
Now, let's just assume that our child knows the word for apple in English, French, German, and Italian, okay? So it's apple, Apfel, Baum, and Mela.
Yeah.
So seeing it written is not a big problem. There is some similarities between the English word and the German word. This is a capital letter, but well, okay. Then here, instead of a second P, you have an F that has to do with a zweite Lautverschiebung, if I'm not mistaken. But let's say you have the same kind of image in another book. You can recognize, okay, this is the pomme or la mela, yeah? When that's not a big problem. So when the languages are quite far away from each other, the child can recognize maybe some letters and figure out this when they have had some kind of formal instruction to decode the message. When the sounds are similar or look similar in written, like in cat, Katze, and Scha, surely Scha doesn't sound similar to Katze and cat. But it can happen that if a child has been trained or has been reading before in French and then starts reading or writing in English, might write cat with a CH instead, or the other way around, might write Scha with a C if there was not this connection between the sounds and the graphic system, etc., etc. So the grapheme, these are signs for grapheme. The CH is a sh sound. The K in German is the K sound, and the C as well in English. Another example, and this is one that we did also with my children, is with the sound, with this sound, the post-alveolar fricative voiceless sound, for anyone who likes phonics and phonetics like I do, in an example like ship. Yeah?
Ship, yeah.
Ship and shift, they're quite similar. You just have the onset. It's a sound that is similar, but you know the rhyme is it's a bit different, but you can make sense out of this. Yeah. But in French, the ship would be bateau, so a completely different thing. But we have a similar sound, sh, as well, and it's written ch. So just we were talking about reading, but it's also about writing them, recognizing them. So when we have a child that is taught French and German and it goes to an English school and is taught then in formal setting that everything that has the sh sound is written sh, they might then do it also with the German or the French, or they might actually mix them all up. Now, coming back to what I said before, if a child already knows how to read in one of these languages and then goes to school and the teacher doesn't know that the child knows already how to read in French and German and is constantly writing sch for ship, yeah, or ch, ship, then the teacher will say there's something going on, the child is not understanding the rules, and we have a bigger problem here. And I just want to say it's not necessarily something that we want to do. But what can be done, and I'm coming back now, I removed the slides. What we can do is actually, when our child was interested in reading before going to school, we can tell the teacher, listen, there is something he or she reads already in French and in German, and we have these kind of sounds, and I see that he's making having some troubles with writing it correctly in English or something. You can practically bridge between what you did at home and what they're doing at school. And this way, everyone is happy, hopefully, and can support the child in the literacy development at school as well. But shall we go? Let me see if there are questions.
Yeah.
There's Yoshito saying hello. Hi, Yoshito. And let us go to the next question, maybe.
Well, before you do, then, so would you actively discourage children from learning to read it in multiple languages, or would you say if the child wants to, then go for it, but make sure that you're collaborating with the teacher, so it's not a shock for the teacher?
So I would say to collaborate with the teacher. It depends on when it is. If it's before the child starts with school, then of course you start with it somehow. Yeah. But what we as adults often have in our head when a child, I want to know what this is. They say they want to know how to read. Maybe they just want to know how to recognize the initial letter from their name everywhere. So reading for me has another meaning than for a 3-year-old. Okay? Yeah. But asking or expecting my 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old when they're not ready to get there in no time is a little bit unrealistic, or let's say it might only help for the lower strand of this reading rope. So they can decode. It's like they can build something with these little pieces, but do they really understand? I mean, if I have a 4-year-old that can read words like metaphor or any abstract word or company or accommodation, does my child also know what it means?
Yeah, in that case, they wouldn't so much.
So, yeah, and this is where then the formal instruction goes deeper, because they will teach the children the words that they actually are using, that they need, they can make sense of, and metaphor comes way later. So it's nice maybe for some parents to say, my child can read Nietzsche at age 4 or 5, but do they understand what they are reading? And this is, for me, then the problem at some point when the child realizes, I'm good at reading, but I have no clue what I'm reading. This is where then the problems can arise, because then you doubt about yourself. You think, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Why do I know how to do it without understanding what I'm doing? So I think that's the critical part where, as parents, we want to foster these things with our children, of course. We want them to grow. We want them to be interested in everything they're doing with the languages, etc. But is this realistic? Is this actually healthy for our children or not? So this is a bit my thing. And I think we can maybe go to the next question and then open everything up to the other questions afterwards, which is how can we confidently and successfully teach our children to read in our home language?
Yeah.
Would you like to start, Roya?
Yes. So, well, we have some tips, and I spoke at the beginning about why we should be looking at reading with our children and why we should be spending time reading with our children. And so some tips to be confident and successful as parents will help us, because as we've seen from the reading rope, there's a lot of things, and if you're going to do it really, 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 really well, that's a bit overwhelming and left for teachers. So what can we do as parents? I think that's what we're going to look at now. So I think the first thing is to have a plan, to make it fun and to make it acceptable for parents, because you might have noticed already as a parent that your child likes to perhaps reread the same book over and over and over and over again a bajillion times. I love that word. It's not a real word, but I like it. So how can we get around reading the same book many, many times, and why are kids doing that? So have a plan. I think we're going to talk about these in the examples in a minute, right? So that would be the first tip. Yeah. And so again, making reading attractive and engaging for the child. So perhaps rather than focusing on phonemes and how sounding out words and how they're built up, think more bigger picture and how to make the book attractive, and help it be a vocabulary activity that they're learning the language rather than the reading skill. And another of the three main tips is that it's really nice when you're spending time with a book with your child to describe what's happening, comment on what's happening, but perhaps ask less questions, because we seem to have this, I think it happens to most people when they read to their kids is, what does that word mean? And what is he doing right now? And sometimes the kids don't know the answers to those questions, and they're not going to help build up the knowledge of the language or what's happening really, and could be discouraging. So yeah, those are the three main things that we've got lots of tips that will fit in with those three main points now, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think I would like to add something actually, that continuously speaking with the child, engaging in speaking, using maybe books or using magazines or using the world around us to foster the words, the use of the words and concepts constantly will also benefit their literacy skills. So the more words they know, they can link to objects, situations, emotions, people, the more verbs they know, the better it is for them then also when they start reading to recognize them, because then they say, oh yes, this is an apple. Yeah, I know an apple because it's over there. I ate one. Yeah, or that's a table. I know it. I know what it means to be sad. I know what it means if I get hurt because I fell on my bike or something. I know what a bike is. So if this is fostered in the first years, this will of course be much more beneficial than to sit down a child on a book in an abstract way, get to know the world around them. So we have to link the words with objects and things in the world that the children are exposed to. So I think this is the main thing.
Yeah, this is really nice that when we're choosing books, we can choose books that mirror things that the kids already know in the real world or activities that they have to do. We have a series of books in Italian, and it's stories for 2-year-olds. And then inside there's stories about brushing your teeth and stories about getting dressed and stories about just little things that are part of their daily routine. And I thought that's really beautifully put together, because that's the world of a 2-year-old. Yes. And so this is nice what you're saying. Okay, so we're looking at things that reflect things that they're already familiar with.
Yes,
and things that interest them.
Exactly, what they're interested in. So shall we do some examples? I think it's time to make some examples.
Okay.
This nice page. I'm sure that people, let me just put away this one. Do you recognize this book?
Do you know this book? I think nearly everybody now has this book in their home. It's also available in several languages. I'm imagining people recognize that this is the Gruffalo. So, I mean, this is huge. Coming from my background, I'm from the UK. This is a British author. But now we have this book also. We were gifted it in Dutch and we have it in Italian. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are aware of the Gruffalo. Julia Donaldson is the author, and she works with beautiful illustrators. She has a huge repertoire, and I'm just quite in love with her books. They're really nice because they're also fun for adults to read. I don't get tired of reading them. They have beautiful rhymes.
Yeah. And the most important thing, they are also very appealing for children.
For the children, yeah.
Which is what we were just saying. Let the children pick the books, but of course we have to also provide the input. But please, sorry.
No, but this is connected also with the thing, you know, if your kid wants the same book over and over and over again, it's pretty nice to have a book that you enjoy reading lots of times. So the rhyming is very amusing. It's really nice. And then, well, I like this page particularly because we can have, I think we can think also in terms of reading with kids, that it's not just about reading the words on the page and then turning the page and then reading the words on the page and then turning the page. And then you can finish a book like this one, you can finish in less than 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. If you just read the words, turn the page, just close the book, it's finished. But there are lots of opportunities for enjoying the book together that help, again, with this bonding experience and also with language acquisition and understanding the world. And then this is all going to lay a great foundation for reading later. And so I like this page in particular because I have lots of examples of things that as parents, when we're reading with our children, there's lots of things that we can do. So first of all, we can see here that the snake is talking to the mouse. And I'm not going to read everything, but there's a bit where the mouse is talking. And we can think about, not the mouse, sorry, the snake is talking. And we can think about the snake's voice. Do you do the voices when you read stories to your kids? That's really fun. And the nice thing about a snake is that they do a sound, right? So I really love the third line down, where are you going, little brown mouse? You know, and you have this sound. And this is also helping, you know, open the child's ear to the sounds of the language that they're learning, and you're sort of highlighting these phonetical sounds without saying this is a S letter and the sound is, which is very formal. You don't need to do that. We can already be putting these things in this playful way. So this is one thing, and then you can go on together with your little kid and make snake noises. Can you make a like a snake, like a snake? And then you're doing that together. That's fun, and you can laugh. Another nice thing about here is that you can look for details in the illustrations. They are fantastic. So you can describe the pictures instead of, you know, moving on to the next page, or just stop and have a look. You can see the snake's house. Look, he lives in a pile of logs. Look at the pile of logs. Logs are trees that have been cut down. Can we find some trees that have been cut down? And so asking questions is okay. I said before, maybe not asking so many questions, but something like, can we see that? Let's point to it. You know, those sort of questions without putting the child on the spot. I think are okay. Asking the question, what is a log, probably is not a good question. But
no, well, I think it depends on when you are reading this book, and I would like
what the child knows.
Yes, the child knows, and the age of the child. For example, I don't know. Well, I had 3 children, and I read one book, of course, but I wanted to make it appealing for a child that is slightly older, 3 years older than the other 2. So I had to combine the different ways of approaches, maybe asking these questions so they can point them out because they cannot say them yet, and let the older one then fill in the gaps, or even go ahead and continue the story. Oh, look, there's a river, and maybe there is another snake, because, you know, there are snakes also in the river. Do you think the snake is one that can swim? And then you can start with a completely other strand of a story. So I think this is also a nice way to combine reading with children from different ages.
That's interesting. Yeah, and we do have story time at home. You generally do have 2 or 3 children if you have more than one, of course.
Yeah.
In the background, there's a little frog jumping, and he's not noticed all the time. So it's good to look for little details like that. And oh, look, there's a frog jumping into the water. Is he jumping into the water? Is he going to land in the reeds? The reeds are these green leaves here. Maybe he's looking for some insects for lunch. Yeah, so you can go off on tangents and use the illustrations to the full. It's really nice. I can get sort of lost in this one. That was 2 ideas. I have a list actually. Also, there's a nice rhyme. I think it's on the next page. It's not here, but the mouse scares away the snake by saying that the Gruffalo is coming, and his favorite food is cake. Cake made of snake or something. I don't have the book now in front of me, but that's a really, really nice rhyme between the snake and the cake. And so talking about rhymes and seeing if you can add other rhymes is also a fun thing to do with books. Also here on this page that we have on the slide, we have wood and good in the first 2 lines, the last words of the first 2 lines. Yeah, the deep dark wood and the mouse looked good. So it's interesting sometimes to see if you can find rhymes. There's also mouse and house. And this is a really nice way of training their ear as well, to look out for these things. And these will really help later when they're learning to read.
Yeah, it was actually scrambled snake.
Scrambled snake, not cake.
It was something with the S, because it's insisting really with the S. And if you if maybe the children watched at that time, I don't know how old they are when you read this book at some point. What was it with Baloo, the Jungle Book?
Yeah.
And there is also the snake Ka.
Yeah.
And also there is insistence of the sounds all the time.
Yes.
So I had my children very, very enthusiastically role-playing snake and look me in the eyes, look me in the, and then all the sus sounds, and then seeing this again in the Gruffalo, or seeing snakes and this alliteration of s's was very, very appealing to them. So it's like, oh, I like that page. I love this page too.
Building these connections, yeah. So the thing with scrambled snake, yes, then you could be like, can you think of other foods that rhyme with scrambled snake? And then you've got cake, so it could even become a word game, yeah. which is fun. Okay, so I think that's most of my Gruffalo ideas for this page anyway. But these things are things that you can do with any book, and that can translate into any language. So you can use the same tips to make reading fun in any language, I would imagine.
Yes, you can. And I would like to just, it's one of my favorite ones from Dr. Seuss. Yes, 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish, and etc., etc. And although maybe younger children would look at the pictures or not focus too much on the words, but when the child is then interested and says, oh, look, there is something that is repeating, even if they don't know how to read fish, but they see that this word is repeatingly mentioned on the page. So that is something where they could look at. Again, this similarity between German and English, for example. So what I always say also to my students that are adults and who are approaching a new language as adults is always, well, if it's too overwhelming, or if you think it's too different, every language has something in common with one of the languages that you know already. To some extent, I mean, mostly. So when we talk about German and English, we have this one, but then focus on the similarities. What is similar? What sounds similar? What looks similar? Even the word, fish and fish. It's only the C that is in between, and then, well, okay, the capital letter, this comes later. But it's something that can be appealing. And then you can say, where do you find fish again in the book? And you find it. Yeah. So then you can count them. You can count the yellow fish, or the red fish, or the blue fish. So you can actually use a book in so many ways. And by not only focusing on the written word, which we often do when we think, okay, now my child needs to learn how to read a book, is actually giving them the sense, or helping them to structure what they are saying. Because it's like storytelling. This comes first, then this, and then that. You have a structure of a storytelling thing, which is basically what you find in all kind of novels and stories that they will be exposed to. So it's like a basic structure where they can build on and what they can make sense of. So the storytelling is a huge for us.
To find the sequence, what's the beginning, middle, end, what's coming next. You can guess what's going to happen next. That's nice. Another thing you said about, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking about counting the fish. Noticing activities are also really, really good to do, because I think that's a skill that children have to learn, to be able to notice details and focus on details. And that's a skill, again, that will later, when the explicit language training starts, will really help them if they're already used to looking for small things or finding small things and noticing how words are the same or different. That's something we can train beforehand. That was going to help them later.
Yes. And then, okay, now today here I'm making examples with English books, but you can also take books in the other languages and just compare. You take another book where it's about fish in your other poisson, maybe in French, or pêche in Italian, and you focus on what these fishes can do in these other books and what it is about. Let me focus on another one. This was one other favorite book of my children, The Dragon Catcher by Tanya Batt. My dad's a dragon catcher. And there on this page, for example, it's about the little boy Toby, who is worrying. So you have a repetition of the word worried, worrying, etc. But of course, maybe if it's an emergent reader, so it's starting to read, you can say, okay, there is a bus and he worried. And bus, you have the same in Bus in German, le bus, il bus, or l'autobus in Italian. So you have certain things that are very similar to other languages that you have, and you have to help you the pictures. Never underestimate picture books. Also, for adults who want to learn an additional language, I find it's amazing how much you can learn in a more playful way and in a much more effective way, in my opinion, than only textbooks for adults. But this is for another, maybe another talk that we can have together. And then here we have the bath. Yeah, he's worried over dinner, and in the bath, you see him worried, you see the face, you can talk about emotions, but then you have bath, bad in German, bagno, and bain in French. It's very similar. And the worrying, you can have a whole discussion about what worrying means. He looks sad. Is sad always worrying, or is there are people who smile but worry anyway? And what does it mean or how would you say in the other language? And maybe you have a book where a child is worrying or a situation is worrisome. And you know that in French it means s'inquiéter or preoccuparsi in Italian, or sich Sorgen machen, which is longer. You don't have a verb in German. So you can have a whole kind of much more detailed discussion about language, actually. It's a little bit about meta language, I think, in that kind of setting. But
that's interesting to involve also emotions, because emotional intelligence is really important. And we know that children who can label emotions deal with them much better. So if you can help them have the words to explain what they're feeling, then they're less likely to have a tantrum or a meltdown, because they're able to express themselves. And this is a nice way of including that in the reading experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's come back.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, let me just share one more page. This is when we talk about 4 to 7 year olds and what to read with them. There is a discrepancy between the words that they might be able to already sound out and understand, and what we were reading with them. So this is what we read with our 4-5 year olds. But you can see it's a German. You can see that it's quite difficult for a child. First of all, a lot of text. It's a lot of text. It's a lot of long words, Schneckenhäuser, Kleiderturm, die Schubladen, und schüttet den Inhalt einfach mitten ins Zimmer, nichts. Then you have things like aua, yeah, that's fine, plumpst, moment. In order to read this, the child needs really a little bit of time. So, but if we have read this text, like you said, what was the word? A bazillion times?
A bajillion times. It's a kind of a made-up word, but that's what we end up doing. You know, it's like again, okay, I have to read the same book again.
It's a neologism. We just use it. If we use it, others use it. It will maybe enter the vocabulary. We never know.
I don't mind that.
When our children know the story and they have read it with us the bazillion times,
yeah,
tons of then they might say, oh, this is commode. Yeah, they might recognize, and Fridolin, it's the name of the little boy or the little animal. They will recognize some and then point them out and say, oh yeah, das ist Fridolin wieder. Fridolin, F. Everything that starts with F or everything that starts with S, as we were talking about S. So this is also a way to approach reading in all our languages. We were just talking about the snake in the graph follow. Let's see where we can find snakes in this story, or the S's, or the sounds of S, if you want to focus on the sound. But I would not go much further than the child is interested in. So I think this is a bit the message that we wanted to give is also, go with the child and not with what you have in mind. You want to have your child that is able to read Nietzsche at age 5. This is
we're not reading in full sentences at age 4, or no, it's not so realistic. No. A nice thing about what you just said is that when both my kids, we read books to them that they learned so well that they would always finish the sentence. And I don't know why it happens, but it must be a developmental thing that they always manage to latch on to the last word. And I guess that the other words maybe are kind of getting all, it's hard to hear the individual words in the phrase, but they manage to get the last one or the last syllable or so. Yeah. And something else interesting about this last point is that my kids have storybooks that are picture storybooks, but very heavy on text. That of course there's no way that my 3-year-old or 6-year-old are going to read those, but they know the stories so well that what happened recently that surprised me, my daughter was listening to audio CDs. We have stories on CD, and she could pull out the CD and the book they didn't come together as a set, but she was listening to Cenerentola, which is Cinderella, and she was able to go to our book library and pull out a book of Cinderella and basically match the story to the pictures. And it didn't matter to her which language the book was in. It's just that she was listening to Cinderella and she was looking at the pictures of Cinderella. And she's done this now with several stories, and she's 3. And I found that a really interesting thing, that she knows her books so well that she can match them with unrelated stories that she's listening to. And another thing, she comes sometimes is, like you said, making connections between snake in this book and we find the snake in that book. Sometimes they watch things on a video on TV, or they love Paw Patrol right now, but they might be like, oh, on Paw Patrol there was a dolphin, we were reading about the dolphin, and then she brings me a book with the dolphin in it. And this is really nice to build these connections and build these bridges between concepts and things and that cultural awareness.
Yes, and then this is actually something that helps us also to find out what they are interested in and what kind of vocabulary they are actively using, and that they might also be able to recognize when it's written. So if there is a dolphin and everything is about the dolphin, and then they happen to recognize a word, this is just a word. When they go to school, they have these side words or mostly frequently used words when they learn English. There are different approaches throughout the different kind of settings and curricula and languages. I know the approaches from how to teach Italian or how to teach German and how to teach French is different from how to teach English. So knowing that and trying to do it yourself at home, it is quite something. If you know it already, it can help. But I would not expect, and I would not put this on my shoulders as a mother or father or caregiver if you see that maybe having help would be much better.
Yeah, I think
you can have fun with reading. You can even read, and we didn't even define what reading is. We were talking about the reading rope, but reading is already what you said before, is going through a picture and talking about what you see there and what is most important and what happens next and what happened before we get there. So the mouse, before meeting the snake, she was with someone else. And how come now the snake? Because there are the logs and the snake lives in the logs. So this is why. So you can have a whole structure that is also a literacy skill. So literacy is not only being able to read and to make sense of it and to make beautiful sentences. And then also we have the writing. We didn't talk about that. We might talk about this another time. But it's really about understanding the underlying structure of the language that the child is acquiring or learning. So we can help with that by talking a lot, talking and talking and talking, engaging and letting them talk. And there is this other suggestion that comes actually from the speech therapists. I've trained, but I'm not a certified speech therapist. That is the OWL principle or strategy. You observe, you wait, and you listen.
Yeah.
And then the child comes up with all kind of things. So getting on, or taking the pace that the child is taking and not mine, that helps a lot. But
I like what you said about reading. Is also you're reading the pictures, and this is something interesting for me, coming from also the baby. My interest in babies and how they're developing, and how they can interpret visual symbols and then the baby sign language. It's really nice to try and involve the other senses as well. So we're talking about visually reading the words, but you can read the pictures. You can involve other senses, so the listening to CDs and then looking at a picture, or nursery rhymes, or all opening up the ears to the sound of the language. And I think the melody of the language is a really important thing to have already in place. Not so much the knowledge of the phonetics, but just being aware of the sound of the language, the melody of the language, and that's going to help as well, I imagine, when it comes to teach those.
Let me just share a comment from Yoshito. Thank you very much, Yoshito, for being here. Maybe you have left already. I don't know. I hope you're still here. Yes, and siblings can end up teach their younger siblings, and this is something that I also did with my son started very, very early on. My daughters were still babies, but he would sit in the middle and just take a book and then tell the story. He wasn't able to read yet because he was just 3.5 years old, 4 maybe, but he wasn't able to read in the proper sense, or the sense, the more teaching to read sense. But he knew the stories, and so he would go through the book and turn the pages and tell them what was there. So they know more, yes. The younger siblings learn by listening to them. And they did so up to when they were 12, 13. And even now, sometimes they share their readings. And I find this a very nice habit to have in a family. And I would like to quote also Adam Beck at this point, because he says it in his book as well. And he did it with his children. He still does it. He reads every morning. Even if it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on how much time we have, to read with our children. Not only to our children, but with our children, in terms of asking, what do you think? Do you understand this word? What other word can we use? What are synonyms, depending on the age of the child? Of course, we're talking 4, 7-year-old. I have in my head now my teenagers that might be more able to respond. So
I think that's nice. It brings us around to the beginning again about having a routine. So it might be the bedtime reading routine, or it might be like I tend to read more with my kids maybe at bedtime or during the day. My husband likes to read to them after breakfast at the table, when we're all together around the table. And if it becomes part of your habit and part of your routine, and then discuss a little bit what related to the thing that you're reading, it's going to be a great help to your children as they develop.
Yes, and maybe also for those who have many different languages like we have at home, we know about code switching and code mixing, right? And this is something that we are maybe afraid of when our children start reading in different languages. But it's a very, very common phase on reading or learning to read in different languages, to mix the different languages also when reading. So when understanding the reading, to mix the words, to pronounce them in a slightly different way, because they look almost like in German, and so I pronounce them in German maybe, or and there it can be really helpful to determine, if you have 3-4 languages at home like we have, to determine, okay, on Thursday we read books in this language, and on Friday books in that language. I mean, you can do it with 4 to 7 and even teenagers. We have several days in the week where we say, okay, this is now the French moment, or where we watch a French video, or we read a French text, and that one is the Italian one. But always ask maybe the children if they're okay with this. And if they're okay with 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes. If they're okay with half an hour, it's half an hour. We go with that.
Yes, yeah. That's something that we didn't mention, that if they need to move around, then roll on the floor like snakes and slither like snakes. So if they need to jump like the frog, let them jump like the frog. And if they're not interested anymore, put the book down and get another one, or just stop. That's, we shouldn't be making them do it when they're not interested. And that's something funny you said. So I was just saying my husband likes to read at breakfast time. So usually he reads in Italian because that's his language, and the kids, but he always asks them, do you want to hear this? So he has a page or something. Do you want to hear this in English, French, or Italian? And they always choose Italian because that's Papa's language. But then they have the choice, and he likes to have the French sneaking in a little bit. And it's really nice because then okay, at that moment that's that language. So they have the choice, but so far they always choose Italian with Papa. That's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a question from Yoshito. Thanks. I have another question. My sons don't really ask for the same book over one day to the next, but from what I understand, children generally ask for the same book over and over. Where is the need or lack of need to read the same book coming from? I think it's my 3 children also were very different. I had one that always wanted the same book every evening at the same or almost same time before bedtime, and others who would always pick the other ones. And then I read these many books just to meet the needs and the wants and of every child. I think it depends very much on the child itself. There is not a lack or something. I would not read too much into it.
No, I think if they want that, they will make it clear, won't they? And like my 3-year-old, for example, she really desperately wants to memorize the book, and she loves finishing the sentences. And I think that over and over again thing is for her way of learning the book, learning the language, and it's her way of doing that. Yeah. And then it's like a compulsion almost, she really has to have it again and again and again. So this is why it's nice to have a plan to make it acceptable for me, to find it enjoyable, because I can see she needs it, but it could become boring for me, Yeah.
Yes, or it's somehow comforting. Maybe it's a book that makes her feel in a certain way that she wants to feel it every day at the same time, or before then reading something new, she rather prefers hearing something or reading something that she already knows. Or we didn't mention audiobooks, which I would like to stress a little bit more now. I know it's
we're an hour, but we can do a couple more minutes. Yeah, I mentioned that she's listening to audio CDs. These are audio books. Yeah, so these are lovely. What did you want to say about that?
Yes, I have a daughter who doesn't like to read much, or she didn't like to read much. Now she reads much more, but she is a fan of audiobooks. So she can repeat, I don't know, The Lord of the Rings. She listens to The Lord of the Rings. She has certain passages that she just knows by heart, which she wouldn't have, I'm sure, if she would have only read the book. So these are things where I say, okay, this is also a skill, because I personally always struggle to learn by heart. But she listened to it, and I mean, The Lord of the Rings is a long thing. So she listened many times, and she knows them by heart. The same for the fables from the Brothers Grimm, that is very traditional kind of reading and knowing in German. And she knows all these fables by heart. And she knows how everyone speaks, even the different voices and what they said. And this is also a skill. It's a mnemonic skill, a memorizing skill that is amazing. This is also something that has to do with literacy to some extent. But I think if a child is less prone to read all the time on a paper, but would like to draw and listen and understand, and in this way gets access to the world of words and of that culture and that language, it's also a great way. So I think we can actually combine everything. You mentioned all the kinesthetics, so the moving.
Some children need to move.
Down, but let them move, let them roll around, let them jump and draw something. our children need to move, and we know it ourselves. If we sit the whole day, our brain is somehow going to fall asleep. So if we move as well, we are much more prone to memorize things much better and to learn things much better. So
yeah, that's a really good point. That children can they're often listening when you don't think they're listening. So if we're reading to them, or they're listening to an audio CD and they look like they're doing something else, it's still going in. That's really important to be aware of, because I've had parents in my teaching experience before that said, oh, she's not interested, I'm reading to them and she's off doing something else, but she's, it's going in, and people don't realize that sometimes. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we come to an end.
Yeah.
There was, I think, one more comment.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, there is one. Let me share this one. Thank you. It's very informative, from the Philippines. Thank you.
Wow.
07 Phil.
Thank you very much.
And then we have a Facebook user. Hello, when you talk about bedtime reading, do you mean parents reading to children, or children reading themselves? I always mean parents reading to children or with children. And this is it's a good one. I mentioned Adam Beck before, but I'm an enthusiast of reading with children, no matter what age. So even if they are independent readers, yes, of course, they can also read by themselves at some point. But even if they are not, even if they are, there are moments where you can also see that they might not understand everything that they are reading, and so they might need our help to understand a little bit more about the book or the story that they're reading. And it's nice to share, so you know what they're reading and what they might be struggling with a new concept, a new term, a new kind of form of sentence or something. So that is why I say it's nice also to read with the children. So I hope.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've heard before if parents were like, oh, I don't read anymore because my kid can read by themselves. But keep reading to your children aloud as long as they will let you, I think. And it's also going back to the bonding thing, you're producing oxytocin. So this is great for their development too, on another level. And also it's a really good springboard for big conversations that you might not have otherwise, about the world, about these big scary things that they have to learn and we have to teach them. Books can support that. Keeping the lines of communication open, because if we don't have that when they're small, how are we going to do that when they're bigger?
Yeah, and we were talking now, we made examples of fiction books, non-fiction books. It's also a nice way to start a conversation. And some children prefer non-fiction books, others prefer fiction books. So go with what the child likes, and then starting to talk about this will consolidate what they are reading or starting to read or starting to understand. There are also some tests that you can do in order to find out which book is actually the best one for your child for that level of fluency. But maybe we'll talk about this in another time.
For older children. It's been such a great...
I would just say thank you to everyone who could make it this morning to join us here. And yes, for whom it wasn't possible to follow us live, you're very welcome to share your questions in the comments on YouTube and also on Facebook, and we will just answer them in the next days or so.
Yeah, you will have also, I imagine, links to find us. So if you want to get in touch, that will be easy. And we have a replay. We have a replay of this, right? So we're going to put this up, and it can be watched later for people who didn't make it.
Absolutely, yes. It will be on my YouTube channel as well. So it will stay there. So you can watch it over and over again if you wish. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roya, for taking the time. It was amazing. There will be others like these.
This is really a pleasure for me, because this is something I've been thinking about, and I'm sure lots of parents have been thinking about that. And I'm coming from a background as a parent that is also a teacher, but I know that many parents don't have that background. So I think this has been a really nice way of helping us all give the best to our children in this area. So I'm really happy. I'm going to watch it again, I think. There have been many tips that I would like to include. in our reading together.
There's more and more, and I'm sure that many parents have so many ideas. But what we wanted to convey this morning is just to say, okay, it's not something that you can do just on the side. It's a bit more than that, and think about how much you can do and you want to do. This is not something that someone can fail or something, but I would say just do as much as you want to do and can do, and let you guide by your child, and get the help of a teacher, of a neighbor, and
work together with them.
Yes, to get used to doing this activity, because we are like what we want, or what I want. I think all parents want their children to be lifelong readers, and that reading becomes a pleasure, because we need to be able to read in order to learn new things, and this is the goal that we all have. So make it enjoyable, enjoy it yourself, and yes, see you the next time. Tot de volgende keer.
Tot de volgende keer. Bye, Ute. Thank you. Bye, everyone.